So I just watched the debate between Licona and Ehrman, and I'm going to analyze Licona's opening statement. He lays out a framework that, if we follow, the resurrection can be historically validated, right? And let's look through this. Let's analyze what he talked about. So first of all, before we jump in, I want to back up and kind of talk you through the two different factors of an argument. You have the actual argument itself, like the framework of the argument, right? So basically saying, if this is true and this is true, then this is true. That's the framework of the argument. You don't actually have to take into account the data yet. You just agree or disagree that if this is true and this is true, then this would be true. Here's an example. A framework that we would agree on is if all men die and Socrates is a man, and Socrates either is dead or will die. That makes sense. We're just saying the first two are if statements, right? We're not proving the first two premises. We're just saying that if the first premise is true and the second premise is true, then the conclusion is definitely true, right? So that's like the framework. An example of a framework that would not work is if I came up to you and said, if my bedroom wall is blue, then my feet are also blue. I'm sorry, if my bedroom wall is blue and I have feet, then my feet are also blue. We reject that argument before even knowing if your room wall is blue or if you have feet. Like, it doesn't matter, right? So again, there's two different things. There's the framework and there's the actual data you plug in. And I believe these are called if an argument's valid versus an argument's sound. If an argument's valid, I might get mixed, but if an argument's valid, that means that granting the premises does lead to the conclusion. Whereas if it's sound, it means, yes, the premises are actually true. So an argument, again, can be sound or valid, but unless it's both, it doesn't work. So we have to ask ourselves, is the framework Mike Licona gave, is it valid? Does following this framework lead to correct conclusions given a variety of historical examples? So here's what he said. He said, basically, you can judge historical claims on these 3 points. One is explanatory scope. The best explanation includes all of the relevant data. If you have 10 data points, the best explanation is the one that actually includes all of them. It doesn't have to leave any out because it doesn't fit. It takes all of them. Second is explanatory power. All of the relevant data fits strongly into the explanation. So nothing is, weakly explained. Everything's strongly explained. Like it hardcore fits. Like every single piece, the theory explanation can really strongly explain everything. Explain each piece. And then less ad hoc, meaning we don't have to try and fit anything into there that's janky. We don't have to try and come up with these convoluted explanations to make data fit. It just very naturally fits, right? So he says, let's compare the explanations, and whatever this criteria describes as the top of the list, the most likely, we can believe that to be the most likely. Okay? So stop. That's the idea. I want to say here, we're not going to look at the actual data of the resurrection right now. We're just going to run through this framework. We're going to run a couple tests on it. I am a software engineer, so I think of this as an algorithm. It's a series of steps to see, to try and come up with what is the most likely to be true. And as a software engineer, when I create an algorithm that's supposed to do something, I throw a bunch of test data at it. Like I might create an algorithm that's supposed to find the capitalized word in a big bunch of text. And so I'm going to throw it a bunch of different batches of text with a capitalized word in it. I'm going to throw it a batch of text without a capitalized word and see if it breaks. I'm going to throw it a batch of text with only capitalized words. So let's kind of run this through. Just an example, another example to see what happens. Okay, so here's the historical. We're going to come with the historical data called the rabbit in the hat. So here's the data that definitely happened. 3 people saw a man with an empty top hat. 3 people then saw the man take a rabbit out of the top hat. the man claimed to make the rabbit magically appear. And finally, the 3 people believed him. Okay, so let's take 2 different possible explanations to this. One, it was a magic trick. One explanation. Second explanation is it was real magic. Okay? Let's look at number 1, explanatory scope. The best explanation includes all the relevant data. This is all we have. Yep, magic trick. This is exactly what you'd expect. It was a magic trick. So scope, 10 out of 10. All right. Power, let's see. So the data fits strongly into explanation, super strongly. Yeah, this is 100%. You couldn't make this better for what if it was. I'm sorry, I have my wrong thing here. I'm sorry. I meant to say it was real magic. Okay, back in. It was real magic. Explanatory scope. This covers all the data. If it was real magic, you'd expect to see an empty hat. You'd expect to see a rabbit come out of the hat. You'd expect him to say it was a magic trick, and you'd expect people to believe him. So, scope, 10 out of 10. Power, right? Just take all the data and should really, really fit strongly. 3 people saw a man with an empty hat. Took a rabbit out of the hat. The guy said it was magic. 3 people believed him. Exactly what you'd expect if it was real magic. Power, 10 out of 10. Okay, less ad hoc. You don't have to work to make anything fit. Everything is 100% magic. So we're going to say less ad hoc, 10 out of 10. Okay. Now, let's compare that to the historical premise that it was a magic trick. First of all, explanatory scope. Best explanation includes all the relevant data. Let's see. Does it explain everything? They saw it empty with the top hat. Well, it was a trick. They saw the man take a rabbit out of the top hat. Yeah, I mean, if it was a trick, you'd expect that. The man claimed to make the rabbit magically appear. If it was a trick, you'd expect that. The 3 people believed him. I mean, I don't know. If it was a trick, maybe they wouldn't believe him, right? It's less likely you would believe a magic trick than you'd believe real magic. That seems to be the case to me, that if someone did real magic, it'd be more believable than if they did a magic trick. So we're going to say scope, 9 out of 10. Doesn't take in, actually, you know what? We'll just say 10 out of 10 because I don't want anybody to get really specific on me or get really granular. Explanatory power. All the relevant data fits strongly into the explanation. 3 people saw a man with an empty top hat. Okay, would we expect that if it was a magic trick? Yes. 3 people then saw the man take a rabbit out of the top hat. Would we expect that if it was a magic trick? Yes. The man claimed to make the rabbit magically appear. Sure. The 3 people believed him. Sure. I'll say 10 out of 10. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. Less ad hoc. All right. 3 people saw a man with an empty top hat. 3 people then saw the man take a rabbit out of the top hat. The man claimed to make the rabbit magically appear. The 3 people believed him. Well, here's when we consider less ad hoc. What is the additional? What else do we have to assume to make this explanation true? Well, we have to assume a couple other things. One, we have to come up with some sort of system or explanation for how he made a rabbit come out of a empty top hat. Okay, this is challenging. Okay, second, we have to believe the people were fooled, right? And they weren't able to tell that it was a magic trick. Okay? And we have to believe the man was lying. So again, to make explanation 2 work, we kind of got to add a lot of stuff. What do we got to add? We got to come up with some sort of system or explanation for how he made a rabbit come out of an empty top hat without people seeing it. 2, we have to take on the belief that the people were fooled and they weren't able to tell that it was a magic trick. Finally, we have to take on the belief that the man was lying, that he was trying to fool people, as opposed to just being a magician. So this is significantly more ad hoc. We have to do work to make these things fit. We have to come up with some sort of explanation for why the rabbit came out of the hat. That's challenging. That's gonna be convoluted, right? If you look up how to make a rabbit trick appear, it's a little convoluted. You have to hide it in your sleeve or some complicated thing, and you have to ask yourself, well, would people really not be able to tell that was a magic trick? So I'll be honest, I'll put that at 5 out of 10. Could be anywhere. Could be 6 out of 10. Could be 3 out of 10. Just for sake of purposes, I'm picking 5 out of 10. Okay. Now, that's the analysis, right? Okay. Back out, pause. If we actually take this historical example, obviously it was a magic trick. You and I both know that if we hear a story like that, it's a magic trick. All right? But what is this algorithm? What is this framework? What answer does it give us? Well, it tells us that it was actually real magic, because that's the answer that's least ad hoc. That's the answer that has the most power and the most scope. And it says that the magic trick explanation, it's kind of complicated. You gotta jump through a lot of hoops. You gotta come up with some explanation. Like, how could they take a rabbit out of the hat without people seeing it? That's really convoluted. And come on, like, what are the chances of that? And you think 3 people are really that dumb? Okay, so that's what happens when we test out this framework, this explanation. We kind of come to some weird conclusions that don't match with what we normally believe. So to me, I look at this and I say, okay, well, this doesn't work then. This would not work for a supernatural type event, because clearly we take it through one that's obviously fake. Like, this wouldn't convince anyone, but it does convince this framework. This framework is convinced that magic really happened. So I think that's kind of the death blow to the Licona framework. Is that if you test other miracle claims, other historical examples of amazing things happening, you find that it just grants them. And I think that really shows how weak it is, and it's not a good argument for the resurrection.